My name's Jack Hensley, and I never thought I'd be the guy whose life got turned upside down in a single morning. But here I am, telling you how it all started. It was a Tuesday, June 17th, 2024, and I was in our little kitchen in Springfield, Missouri, waiting for the coffee pot to finish gurgling. I was swiping through my phone, checking emails, when a text popped up from Human Resources at the hardware store where I'd been working for 8 years. Jack, we need you to come in early. Urgent meeting. No details, just be here by 8. My gut twisted, but I told myself it was nothing big. Maybe they were finally giving me that assistant manager spot I'd been after. I leaned over to kiss my wife, Tara, goodbye. She was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. See you tonight, I said. She muttered something like, yeah, later, without looking at me. That should have been my first clue something was off, but I brushed it aside. Tara had been distant lately, spending more time texting than talking to me, but I figured she was just stressed about her new job at the bank. When I got to the store, the human resources lady, Mrs. Carter, was waiting for me in the back office with my supervisor, Greg Tillman, and another manager I barely knew. Their faces were grim, like they were about to tell me someone died. Mrs. Carter slid a folder across the table and started talking. Jack, we've received multiple complaints about your behavior. Inappropriate comments, unwanted attention toward female employees. We're terminating your employment effective immediately. I sat there, stunned, my mouth dry as sandpaper. What are you talking about? I don't even talk to anyone outside my team. This is crazy. But they had a stack of papers, dates, times, detailed accounts of things I supposedly said or did. None of it was true, but it was written so convincing it might as well have been. Greg wouldn't meet my eyes, just stared at the floor like a coward. I tried to argue, but Mrs. Carter cut me off. The decision's final. Security will walk you out. As I packed up my toolbox and the few personal things from my locker, my hands were shaking. 8 years at that store, 8 years of showing up early, staying late, helping customers haul lumber, and now this. Security escorted me to my truck like I was some kind of criminal. On the drive home, I called Tara. Straight to voicemail. I checked our joint bank account on my phone at a stoplight. My heart stopped. It was empty. All $27,000 we'd saved for a down payment on a house gone. A transfer had been made the day before to an account I didn't recognize. When I got home, Tara was in our bedroom, packing a duffel bag. She didn't even flinch when I walked in. Took you long enough, she said, zipping up the bag. I stood there, my voice shaking. What's going on, Tara? Did you have something to do with those complaints? Did you take the money? She laughed, a sharp, cold sound that cut right through me. You're so dense, Jack. I've been setting this up for months. Everyone at that store thinks you're a creep now. Good luck getting another job around here. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why would you do this to me? She turned to face me, her eyes hard. Because you're a loser. 8 years at the same dead-end job, no ambition, no guts. Greg, though, he's got a future. I'm going with him. She smirked, and the room tilted. Greg Tillman, my supervisor. The guy I trusted, worked under, even grabbed beers with after shifts. They've been together behind my back. Don't bother calling your folks, she added, heading for the door. I already told them about your behavior at work. They're ashamed of you. Oh, and the truck's in my name, so don't get any ideas. She walked out, and I heard her car peel away. I sank onto the couch, my head spinning. I called my parents anyway, desperate for someone to believe me. My dad answered, his voice cold. We taught you better than this, Jack. Your mother's beside herself. I could hear Mom sobbing in the background. Dad, it's not true. Tara made it all up. But he cut me off. We need time to deal with this. Don't call us for a while. The line went dead. That night, I slept in my truck in the parking lot of a 24-hour gas station. The house was Tara's, something she'd insisted on when we moved in together, and I'd been dumb enough to agree. No job, no money, no family, no home. She'd taken everything. But as I lay there, staring at the roof of my truck, something shifted inside me. The shock and pain turned into something else, anger, cold and sharp. Tara thought she destroyed me, left me with nothing. She was wrong. She left me with nothing to lose, and that was a dangerous thing. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank note. This wasn't over. Tara, Greg, my parents, they all thought I was weak, a pushover. I was going to show them just how wrong they were. They wanted to paint me as the bad guy? Fine. I'd give them a story they'd never forget. I started writing down my plan. This was just the beginning. I'm Jack Hensley, and after Tara tore my life apart, I spent 3 nights sleeping in my truck in that gas station parking lot. The first night, I barely slept, just stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that awful day. The second night, I tried to figure out how I'd missed the signs, Tara's late nights, her sudden interest in dressing up for work, Greg's awkward silences around me. By the third night, I was a mess, running on fumes, my clothes wrinkled and my stomach growling from nothing but gas station hot dogs. I was at rock bottom, and it smelled like stale coffee and motor oil. Then my old buddy Mike Russo saved me. He'd heard through some mutual friends that I'd hit hard times. His text came through late on that third night. Jack, what the hell's going on? Get over to my place. You're staying with me until you're back on your feet. I didn't argue. I grabbed my duffel bags, stuffed with a few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, and my laptop, and drove over to his house on the edge of Springfield. Walking into Mike's place felt like stepping into a different world. He didn't say much, just handed me a cold beer and pointed to the guest room. "It's yours as long as you need it," he said. "When you're ready to talk, I'm here." That first night, I crashed hard, the kind of sleep you only get when your body's too exhausted to fight anymore. But the next morning, sitting at his kitchen table, I started spilling everything. It took a week to get it all out. How Tara had betrayed me, how she'd been sleeping with Greg, how she'd emptied our bank account, how my parents had turned their backs on me. Mike listened, his jaw tightening with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Jack, you're not done. You're just starting over. This time, you're going to do it right." I took his words to heart. The next day, I started looking for work. I landed 2 jobs within a week, one unloading trucks at a warehouse during the day, the other washing dishes at a diner called Sally's Kitchen at night. The warehouse job was brutal, lifting heavy crates, sweating through my shirt every shift, but it kept my hands busy and my mind off Tara. The diner gig was quieter, just me and a sink full of greasy plates, but it paid the bills. Every paycheck felt like a small victory, a step away from that gas station parking lot. Then, about a month into my new routine, I overheard something at the diner that made my blood run cold. I was scrubbing a pot when 2 regulars at the counter started talking about a new car wash opening up downtown. "Heard it's that Jack Hensley running it," one of them said, sipping his coffee. "She's engaged to some hotshot from the hardware store now." I froze, the pot slipping from my hands into the soapy water. My hands shook as I dried them off and pulled out my phone during my break. I opened Facebook, and there it was, Tara and Greg, smiling in a photo, announcing their engagement and the grand opening of Tara's Spotless Washington. The comments were full of congratulations, including one from my own dad. "Proud of you, Tara. Can't wait to see the business thrive." I called my sister, Emily, that night. She'd been the only one in my family still talking to me, though she kept it quiet so Mom and Dad wouldn't find out. "Jack, it's worse than you think," she said, her voice low. "Mom and Dad put their entire savings into Tara's car wash, $120,000. They think it's a sure thing." I felt sick. My parents, who'd called me a disgrace, had handed over their life savings to the woman who'd ruined me. The next morning, I started digging. I didn't want to. I had to. Even if my parents hated me, I couldn't let Tara scam them out of everything. I started piecing things together. Tara had been planning this for months, the fake complaints at work, the affair with Greg, draining our account. It was all a setup to get money for her business, and my parents' savings were the big prize. I couldn't confront her yet, though. The old Jack would have stormed over there, yelling and making a fool of himself. But those nights in my truck had taught me something: patience. I started keeping a notebook. I wrote down everything I found: dates of bank transfers, screenshots of Tara's social media posts, bits of gossip I overheard at the diner. People love talking to dishwashers. They don't think you're listening. I heard how Greg had pulled similar stunts at his last job, how Tara was already bragging about expanding the car wash before it even opened, using my parents' money as proof she was a big deal. I kept it all, building a picture of what she was doing. One night, I saw my mom at the grocery store. She didn't see me, but I saw her. She looked tired, older than I remembered, carefully checking prices on every item. She put back a box of her favorite tea, opting for the generic brand instead. That hit me hard. Mom used to brew that tea every evening, said it helped her relax. Now she couldn't even afford it. I went back to Mike's that night and threw up in the bathroom, the anger and guilt mixing together in my stomach. Then the local paper ran a story: "Local woman opens dream car Washington." There was Tara, standing in front of her new business, talking about how she'd built it from scratch with the support of her amazing future in-laws. The photo showed my parents at the opening, trying to smile, but I could see the worry in their eyes. I kept that paper, folded it neatly, and added it to my notebook. Not because I needed more proof, I had plenty, but because it reminded me I wasn't falling anymore. I was getting ready to fight back. Looking at that article, something clicked. Tara thought she'd won because she'd taken everything from me. But she'd given me something too: freedom. With nothing left to lose, I was dangerous, not in a crazy, violent way, but in a smart, calculated one. I wasn't going to let her turn me into the villain. I was going to show everyone who she really was. I closed my notebook and turned on my laptop. It was time to start telling my side of the story. I'm Jack Hensley, and after Tara and Greg turned my life into a dumpster fire, I was starting to find my footing again. Living with my buddy Mike, working 2 jobs, and keeping that notebook full of evidence, it was keeping me going. But I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. Tara thought she'd buried me, but I was about to show her I wasn't down for the count. It started small, but in a town like Springfield, Missouri, small moves can make big waves. It all began with a text message. I'd been digging through old emails and found some stuff Tara and Greg probably didn't think I'd kept, messages where they weren't as careful as they should have been. One email from Greg to Tara, sent months ago, talked about getting away for the weekend, while I was supposedly out fishing with Mike. I took a screenshot, blurred out my name, and sent it anonymously to Greg's wife, Lisa, through a burner app I'd downloaded. I watched that little red receipt pop up, and it felt like striking a match in a dry field. I didn't say anything, didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Working at Sally's Kitchen gave me a front row seat to how fast gossip spreads in a small town. People don't think dishwashers listen, but I heard everything. I didn't have to push hard, just dropped a few casual comments to the right people. One night, while wiping down the counter near some regulars, I said, heard my ex-wife's running that new car wash with my old boss. Funny how things work out. That was it. I didn't need to say more. The regulars filled in the blanks themselves, their voices low but eager. Didn't Tara used to be married to that Hensley guy? One of them asked, stirring his coffee. Yeah, the other replied, and now she's with Greg Tillman. Word is, she cleaned Jack out and left him high and dry. By the next week, the story was bouncing around town, neighborhood Facebook groups, the diner, even the warehouse where I worked days. Every time Tara posted about her car wash on social media, the comments section lit up with sly digs about her affair. Nice business, someone wrote. Did your ex-husband's savings pay for it? Lisa showed up at Sally's one night, her face red and streaked with tears. She slammed her phone down on the counter, showing me more screenshots, texts between Greg and Tara she'd found after that first message I sent. Is this true, Jack? She demanded. Was Greg cheating with her the whole time? I didn't say much, just poured her a cup of coffee and let her talk. She ranted about all the late nights Greg had blamed on work, the business trips that didn't add up. By the time she left, I could see the pieces falling into place for her. Sometimes, you don't need to say much. People figure it out on their own. Greg's perfect little world started crumbling fast. Lisa kicked him out within a week, and I heard through the diner grapevine that his kids weren't talking to him. His buddies at the hardware store started giving him the cold shoulder, and I even heard he got passed over for a promotion he'd been bragging about. Meanwhile, Tara started texting me, her messages full of venom. You're ruining everything, Jack. Greg's leaving me because of you. Your parents are going to lose it all, and it's your fault. That last part was meant to sting, but it didn't. My parents had chosen to back Tara over me. If they lost their savings, that was on them. The grand opening of Tara's spotless wash was a train wreck. Word had spread about her and Greg, and in a town like this, your reputation is everything. A couple of local suppliers pulled out last minute, not wanting their names tied to the drama. The crowd that showed up was thin, mostly folks there to gawk and whisper. The Springfield Gazette had planned a big feature on the opening, but they quietly shelved it after the rumors hit. Greg showed up at Sally's one night, drunk and sloppy, pointing a shaky finger at me. You did this, Hensley. You ruined my life. I didn't even look up from the dishes I was scrubbing, just called him a cab and kept working. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd helped destroy my life, and now he was crying about his own. My phone started buzzing with calls from my parents. Their savings were tied up in Tara's car wash, and with the business tanking, they were panicking. Jack, we need to talk, my dad's voicemail said. We can figure this out together. I deleted it without a second thought. They turned their backs on me when I needed them most, believed Tara's lies without even asking my side. Now they wanted help? Too late. Tara's car wash limped along for a few more weeks, but the writing was on the wall. She tried slashing prices, posting desperate ads online, but the damage was done. In a small town, once people turn against you, there's no coming back. The now hiring sign in the window disappeared, replaced by a for lease sign. The last time I drove by, Tara was standing outside, staring at the empty lot, her shoulders slumped. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Instead, I felt nothing, and that was better than revenge. My parents left another voicemail. Jack, please. We were wrong. We need you. I saved that one, not because I was going to help, but because it was a reminder of how far I'd come. Tara's dream was dead, and my parents were facing the consequences of trusting her. They called me weak, a failure. Now they were the ones begging. I didn't respond to Tara's last text either. You planned this, didn't you? You can't prove anything, but you're behind it all. I just locked up the diner that night and walked away. Silence was my answer. I was done letting them control the story. Tomorrow was a new day, and I was ready to see what it brought. I'm Jack Hensley, and by the time Tara's car wash started falling apart, I was feeling something I hadn't felt in months: control. Living with Mike, working my 2 jobs at the warehouse and Sally's kitchen, and watching Tara's world unravel, it was like I'd finally grabbed the wheel of my life again. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was making things happen, and it felt good. But I wasn't done yet. Tara and Greg had taken everything from me, and my parents had turned their backs when I needed them most. Now it was time to see this through. The whispers I'd started at the diner had grown into a full-blown storm. Springfield's a small town, and people love a good story, especially one with a villain like Tara. Every time she tried to post something positive about her car wash on social media, the comments were ruthless. How's that business going, Tara? Still using your ex-husband's money? One person wrote. Another tagged Greg's wife, Lisa. You okay with this, Lisa? Your husband's new fiancé seems real classy. I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. The town was doing the work for me. Lisa was a wildfire all on her own. After she found those texts I'd sent her, she dug deeper into Greg's phone and uncovered a whole mess of lies, late-night calls, secret meetups, even a few hotel receipts. She filed for divorce within a month, and word around town was she got the house and primary custody of their 2 kids. Greg moved into a rundown apartment on the edge of Springfield, and I heard he'd started drinking more than usual. One night, he stumbled into Sally's kitchen, his eyes bloodshot, and tried to pick a fight. You think you're clever, Hensley? He slurred, leaning over the counter. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. I just kept scrubbing dishes, didn't even look up. The cook, Big Tony, hauled him out before he could make a scene. I didn't need to fight back. Greg was already beating himself. Tara's car wash was hemorrhaging money. The grand opening had been a bust, and now she was losing customers faster than she could replace them. I heard from a guy at the warehouse that she'd taken out a big loan to keep it afloat, but the numbers didn't add up. Suppliers stopped delivering soap and wax because she couldn't pay on time. The for lease sign went up in early September, and by the end of the month, the place was locked up tight, the windows dark. Tara tried to spin it on Facebook, posting about taking a break to reassess, but nobody bought it. The comments were brutal. Guess cheating doesn't pay after all. My parents were feeling the heat too. They'd sunk their $120,000 savings into Tara's business, and with it failing, they were in a panic. My sister, Emily, called me one night, her voice shaky. Jack, Mom and Dad are in bad shape. The bank's threatening to foreclose on their house. They're asking about you, wanting to know if you'll help. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Help? They didn't help me when Tara trashed my life. They believed her lies and cut me off. Why should I bail them out now? Emily didn't have an answer, just sighed and hung up. I didn't feel guilty. They'd made their choice. I kept my notebook updated, adding every new piece of the puzzle. I had screenshots of Tara's loan applications, overheard conversations about her begging Greg for more money, even a copy of the foreclosure notice my parents got from the bank. Emily slipped that one to me. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it all yet, but I knew it mattered. Knowledge is power, and I was building a stockpile. One afternoon, I saw my dad at the hardware store, not my old one, a different place across town. I was there picking up some screws for a shelf Mike was building. Dad was in the paint aisle, looking at cans like he wasn't sure what he needed. He'd lost weight, his shoulders hunched, and he was wearing an old jacket I hadn't seen in years. He didn't see me, but I watched him put back a gallon of the good paint and grab the cheap stuff instead. That hit me harder than I expected. Dad used to repaint the garage every summer, always bragging about using the best brand. Now he couldn't afford it. I turned away before he spotted me, my chest tight. Tara called me one night, her voice shrill and desperate. Jack, you've got to stop this. You're destroying everything. Greg's gone, the car wash is dead, and your parents are losing their house. This is all your fault. I didn't say a word, just let her rant until she hung up. She thought I was some mastermind pulling strings, but I wasn't. I just lit the match. The fire spread on its own. The foreclosure notice on my parents' house went public a week later. I saw it in the local paper's legal section. Property at 1427 Oak Street, Springfield, Missouri, to be auctioned November 15, 2024. That was their house, the one I'd grown up in, the one they'd bragged about paying off years ago. Tara's failed car wash had dragged them under, and I knew they were scrambling. My phone buzzed with more voicemails from them. Jack, we're so sorry. We didn't know the truth. Please, we need your help. I deleted them all except the last one. That one I kept, just to remind myself how the tables had turned. I drove by the car wash one last time. The sign was gone, the lot empty except for a few weeds poking through the asphalt. Tara was nowhere in sight, probably licking her wounds somewhere. I didn't feel triumph, not exactly. I felt steady, like I'd weathered a storm and come out stronger. They'd all thought I was weak, Tara, Greg, my parents. Now they were the ones falling apart, and I was still standing. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't done. This was just the beginning of me taking my life back. I'm Jack Hensley, and after months of watching Tara's car wash crash and burn, I was starting to feel like a man with a purpose again. Living with Mike, working my warehouse and diner jobs, and seeing Greg and Tara's lives unravel, it was like I'd been handed a second chance. But the real turning point came in November 2024, when my parents' house went up for auction. That's when everything I'd been through started to feel less like a loss and more like a setup for something bigger. The foreclosure on my parents' place at 1427 Oak Street wasn't a surprise. I'd seen it coming since Tara's business tanked, taking their $120,000 savings with it. My sister, Emily, had warned me they were in trouble, but I didn't expect it to happen so fast. The bank moved quick, and by mid-November, the auction was set. I didn't tell anyone I was going, not Mike, not Emily, nobody. I just showed up at the county courthouse on the 15th, dressed in my regular jeans and flannel, blending in with the small crowd of curious folks and bargain hunters. My parents were there too, standing at the back of the room. Dad's face was tight, his hands stuffed in his pockets, and Mom kept dabbing her eyes with the tissue. They didn't see me at first, and I kept my head down, pretending to study the auction flyer. The bidding started slow, just a few low offers from people looking to flip the house. I waited, my heart pounding, until the price hit a number I could handle. I'd been saving every penny from my 2 jobs, stashing it in a separate account Tara didn't know about. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a down payment. I raised my hand. $35,000, I said, loud and clear. The room went quiet, heads turning to look at me. My parents' eyes locked onto me then, and I saw the shock hit them like a punch. Dad's face went red, Mom's mouth dropped open. The auctioneer nodded, and the bidding kept going, but I stayed in it, raising my hand again and again. When it hit $42,000, the other bidders dropped out. Sold to the gentleman in the flannel shirt, the auctioneer said, banging his gavel. I just bought my childhood home. My parents cornered me in the parking lot after I signed the paperwork. Dad stepped up, trying to look tough like he used to when I was a kid. Jack, what are you doing? We can work this out. You don't need to take our house. I cut him off, my voice calm but firm. You told me a real man doesn't beg, Dad. That's what you said when I asked for help after Tara ruined me. Does that only apply when I'm the one asking? Mom grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. Please, Jack, we're your family. We made a mistake. You're my parents, I corrected, pulling my arm free. But you chose Tara over me. You believed her lies, gave her your savings, and left me in the dust. The eviction notice goes out tomorrow. You've got 30 days to move. Dad's face twisted with anger. After everything we did for you, you'd do this? I didn't flinch. Like giving Tara my college fund behind my back. Or telling the whole family I was a liar when I tried to warn you about her. I turned and walked away, their voices fading behind me. I didn't look back. The next week, I rented the house to a single mom named Carla and her 2 boys. She'd been struggling to find a place she could afford, and I gave her a deal, half the market rate. It wasn't about the money. It was about making sure that house went to someone who needed it, not just another flipper. Carla was grateful, shaking my hand with tears in her eyes. You don't know what this means to us, Jack, she said. I just nodded. It felt good, but it also felt like a jab at my parents, a little twist of the knife. Mom drove by the house a few times after Carla moved in. I knew because Carla mentioned it, saying some older lady kept slowing down out front. I didn't tell her it was my mom, just nodded and changed the subject. Meanwhile, Tara was hitting rock bottom. Word around town was she'd taken a job at a gas station, the same one where I'd slept in my truck those first few nights. I didn't plan it, but one evening, Mike and I stopped there to fill up his car. Tara was behind the counter, wearing a faded blue uniform, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She saw me and froze, her face going pale. I didn't say anything, just grabbed a soda from the cooler and put it on the counter. This all? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I said, keeping my eyes on the soda, not her. Mike paid, and we walked out. As we left, I heard the manager snap at her about a messed up cash drawer. You're on thin ice, Tara, he said. I didn't turn around, just kept walking, feeling the weight of my truck keys in my pocket. Keys to a vehicle I'd bought outright after Tara took the old one. My parents' stuff ended up in Emily's garage. She called me about it, sounding tired. They're staying with me for now, Jack. They're a mess. Mom keeps crying, and Dad's just quiet. I didn't say much, just listened. They'd made their bed, and now they were lying in it. As for Tara, her big dreams of being a business owner were dead, replaced by a minimum wage job and a reputation she couldn't shake. I didn't feel joy seeing her like that, but I didn't feel sorry either. It was just done. I drove home to Mike's that night, the lights of Springfield blurring past. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for a place of my own. I had the house on Oak Street as an investment, but I needed something for me, a fresh start. Tara, Greg, my parents, they'd all thought I was weak. Now they were the ones scrambling, and I was the one standing tall. The tide had turned, and I was ready for whatever came next.